the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody to the Yaron Brook Show. It has been a while. Wow, I haven't done one of these shows from this place for over 2 weeks, and as you know, I did one show in London, and the bandwidth sucked, and it kept breaking down, and hassles, and given my schedule in the UK, and given that I got a cold while I was on the trip to the UK, I just never got around to doing another show. Also, bandwidth sucked in many of my hotels, so I apologize. It's been a long time since I've communicated with you. All right, I hope you all stick with me in spite of the big gap here that has occurred. Today I want to kind of give you an update on how it went in Europe. A lot of exciting things, a lot of interesting things came out of the European trip, and I want to talk about that. It culminated and ended with the first Ayn Rand Institute conference focused on students in Europe, and that was a huge success. It was just exciting and thrilling, and I want to talk about that as well. Before we get there, just a couple of updates in terms of Patreon. So I still have my Patreon account, and I'm going to stick with it until more of you kind of migrate out of it. But you now have 3 different options to support the show, and I'll tell you what they are in the order of my preference, and then you can decide what you want to do. We now have, thanks to Vinicius, who I actually met, who helped me redo my website, and you'll see the website is changing and will be changing in the next few weeks, and it's big improvements. Anyway, we met, and he's from Portugal, and we met in Prague at the Ayn Rand Institute conference in Europe, so that was exciting. So thanks, Vinicius. Anyway, he has made it possible now for you to subscribe and support the show from my website. So my preferred method to support the show is now for you to go to yaronbrookshow.com, click on the support button, and then set yourself up for monthly contributions, and all the perks that you were getting in Patreon will now transfer to the website. So again, my preferred method now is if you could end your Patreon subscription, move it to yaronbrookshow.com, support, and make the contribution over there. Those of you, of course, who haven't contributed yet, please do so. It makes possible. I think you've seen a flurry, particularly when I was gone, a huge number of new short videos. Those short videos, I'm paying somebody to do them, and those short videos are a result of the fact that you are supporting the show. Without your support, we would not be able to make those short videos. So we're making a lot of short videos. We've got a lot of plans for more of those, a lot of plans to improve those short videos, to make them a variety of different topics. But already, I think we've got some incredible, exciting content being delivered out there. So that is made possible through your support. Second best alternative is to go to subscribestar.com, subscribestar.com. And subscribestar.com, Yaron Brook Show. And again, you can set it up just like Patreon. It's very similar to Patreon. It's a very similar service. I know about 70 of you already have done that. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. And again, all the benefits you got on Patreon will now transfer to Subscribestar. So please do that. Those of you who are still on Patreon, I'd really appreciate it if you started migrating over. Again, it'll make it much more efficient, much more convenient if everybody ultimately is on one of those 2 platforms, the yaronbrookshow.com or Subscribestar. If for whatever reason you don't want to use either of those, then you can just send me some support over PayPal directly. That is paypal.me/Yaron Brook Show. It's less convenient because now it means managing 3 platforms. But if those of you who really prefer doing that, do that. And then if those of you still on Patreon can start moving, then I'm hoping that by the end of this month or by the end of next month, we will end Patreon. But I want to make sure that all of you have had an opportunity to really move to one of the new platforms, one of the new ways to subscribe. But again, my preferred way of subscribing to the show is yaronbrookshow.com. All right, let's get on with the actual content, and I'll remind you of the different methods of subscribing, maybe at the end of the show and certainly in future shows. I want to talk about this trip I did to Europe, which I'm, in spite of the fact that I got a cold. It was cold in St. Petersburg and in Stockholm. In spite of the fact that I got the cold, I thought it was a really fantastic trip, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it was a lot of fun, and I think will have a lot of influence, and we'll see the consequences of all these trips in the future. So one of the things I do on an annual basis, usually around this time of year, is I do a tour of British schools, of schools in the UK, primarily the top schools, although I'm open to going to some of the more working class schools as well. It's just a question of opportunities and where I'm being invited. This is the 3rd year. In the first year, I think I did 8 schools. I lectured at 8 schools. I think last year I was scheduled to do 12, but I ended up doing 10 because 2 of them canceled because of weather. This year I did 10 again, and I did the 2 that had canceled last year because of weather, and I did another 8 on top of that. And, they were all terrific. I did 10 schools overall. Many of them, the top schools in the UK, the number 1 boarding school in the UK is Eton. Something like 40 to 50% of all prime ministers in UK history have come from Eton. Eton places at Oxford and Cambridge. They're students, so very, very important place, lots of influence. And so that's exciting. I'll tell you more about Eton in a second. I spoke at a lot of really good girls' schools, so some of the top girls' schools in the UK. I spoke at St. Paul's Girls, again, one of the top 3. JAGS, J. Allen's Girls' School, which is, again, one of the top 3 girls' schools. I'm still waiting to speak at the 3rd among the top 3. I haven't been able to get a gig in that one. We'll work on it. We'll work on it for maybe next year. I spoke at a number of other girls' schools. I spoke at a number of other boys' schools. I spoke in London. I also spoke at 2 different schools at Oxford and 2 different schools northwest of Oxford. Cheltenham's Ladies, another girls' school, and Malvern, which is a beautiful campus, beautiful place. I only visit there. This is my second time. I only visit there at night, but you can tell it's on a hill. It's got a beautiful view. I have to go there. I have to get an invitation to go speak there during the day because it is truly a gorgeous campus, and I'd like to see it during the day. Also spoke at probably the number 1 or certainly one of the top 5 academic schools in the UK. Westminster High School, which is right in the heart of London, right next to Westminster Cathedral and right next to Parliament, and it is a very famous, very successful school. In all of these places, we never had fewer than 35 students. It went up to close to about 100 at some of the places, and most of the attendees were most of the schools, it was between 70 to 80 students at these events. High school students, 11th graders and 12th graders. In England now, somebody says Churchill went there. Churchill did not go to Eton. Churchill actually went to Harrow. I spoke at Harrow's 2 years ago. I haven't been able to get an invitation back. We're still working on that, hopefully for next year. But Churchill went to Harrow, which is one of, I guess one of Eton's regrets. He wasn't accepted at Eton or something like that. This is one of the things that's happening in the UK is that Ayn Rand now is required reading in the politics, kind of advanced politics class, what's called the A1 politics class. And so a lot of these schools, not all of them, but a lot of these schools, they have a politics class, and then they have politics societies and economic societies and philosophy societies. And partially because they are learning Ayn Rand, and partially because their professors, their teachers, are interested in bringing controversial ideas to campus and stretching the students' minds. What a thought! I wonder if that could be exported from the UK to America. They're quite eager to have me come and speak about particular issues, particularly issues that relate to what's going on in the world. So I spoke on anything from free speech to globalization and trade, to inequality, a lot of inequality, the moral case for capitalism. So those are the kind of, Brexit came up a lot, but a lot of those kind of those kind of talks in England, and it was truly fascinating. And I'll tell you, I've said this before. If you've been listening to the show for a while, I think this, that I think British kids are just better educated than American kids. They know more history. They study economics and philosophy in high school. They're sharper. Now, granted, I'm going here to the very best, the best of the best, the smartest kids. Also, many of these are international schools where they have a lot of rich families from outside of the UK sending their kids to these schools because these are boarding schools. So you get some of the smartest kids from around the world, Asians and Middle Eastern and from other countries in Europe. So these kids seem active-minded. Their teachers, while many of them are horrified, horrified, you should see the faces that they pull at what I say, are still open. And most of these schools have told me, please come again next year. We want to have you next year. I think that if I had the time, if I had the energy, if we have the funding, a big part of this is funding, I could probably do 20 schools on a trip like this. And I have to tell you, I cannot think right now of a better audience for the message that we have to convey than UK high school students. Because of the quality of the education, which is just better than American. The UK never bought into progressive education. Because of the fact that they're studying economics, politics, and philosophy, because of the fact that Ayn Rand is being taught in the politics A-level classes, I can't think of a better audience. I think they're better and smarter and more involved and more engaged in ideas. And so, in the openness of the teachers, I give them a huge amount of credit for being willing to bring a speaker whom they disagree with, in really fundamental ways. Anything, and a lot of these schools, by the way, are semi-religious schools. That is, kids have to go to chapel several times a week, and they have theology classes and religious studies. And, at the last school I spoke to at Radley College, where I've spoken at least 3 times, I think. Yes, 3 times every year, basically. There was a priest in the audience with a collar, an Anglican priest, and they teach them Christian ethics, and you could tell how horrified they were when I talked about Ayn Rand and ethics. But they keep inviting me back, and they're open to ideas. The schools, the administrations, the professors are open to ideas, open to opening the students' minds to new ideas in ways that I just don't see in the U.S., and I don't even see in university professors where you'd think that would be a natural occurrence, that would be the obvious occurrence. So, so that was fascinating. And, at Eton, I'll just give you a few anecdotes. At Eton, I was invited to speak by the Keynes Society, which was basically the students' economic society. It's named after Keynes, and there's a reason for that. Keynes went to Eton, as did most prominent Brits. So Keynes went to Eton's, and there's a Keynes Society. So they invited me. A little bit of kind of interesting that I get invited by Keynes Society to speak. A lot of fun. Anyway, there's a George Orwell Society on campus, which tends to be quite left. And the George Orwell Society had invited a speaker for the same evening to speak on the same topic, inequality. And so what they did was the societies discovered this about each other, and they decided to merge the two events and to have a debate, which is excellent because then I get to talk to both societies, double the number of kids, And a debate is always more fun and more engaging for the students. So we actually had a debate at Eton on the whole issue of inequality. And it was fantastic. I mean, the other guy got so angry at some point that that in the middle of my section that I was speaking, got up and started yelling and screaming, and it was a lot of fun. But one of the things that I noticed is there was one particular kid who's clearly very, very leftist, and we had dinner with some faculty and with 6 of the kids, 3 from each of the societies. And he and I got talking, and he was asking a lot of questions, and you could tell the wheels were turning, right? I mean, he was being challenged in ways that he had never been challenged before. He was hearing ideas from me that he had never heard before. And I could tell he was really thinking. And during the debate, I was watching him, and you could tell that he was really observing and looking and thinking, and he was being challenged. Because I think I won the debate fairly easily. And I think he could acknowledge that because he's smart, right? These kids are really, really, really smart. So to be a leftist and be smart, you're ultimately going to have to evade. And if you're honest not to evade, there's a chance for you. There's a chance for you to change your ways. So I thought that was particularly exciting. I'd love to find out if I had any long-term impact on this kid. So, this was... That was an exciting event. Let me think about anything else that was particular. I mean, there were a lot of standout events. I mean, all of these schools were very, very good and very interesting. And again, I actually, from a number of these last year, I got emails from parents who were really, really happy to hear that I had spoken at the school, and I got built some relationship with some of the parents as a consequence of the talks that I gave at the schools. So that was good. One other event in the UK I want to talk about, and then we'll go to some of the overseas events outside of the UK. And after we cover all that, we'll go to some of the items in the news. But I think this is fun stuff and interesting stuff that many of you would be interested in. The other UK event that I did was a debate at the University of Kent. The debate at the University of Kent was sponsored by the students, I guess the Liberty Union at the university, and the Marxist Union at the university. So those were 2 student groups that sponsored it. The Marxists got to nominate who they would put up as a debate to debate me. And it was basically socialism versus capitalism as a debate. Now, this video is available online. I think it's already available on my channel. The audio and the video are not great. A big challenge, and I know a big challenge is audio videotaping these live events well. So at 9 of the 10 schools, they wouldn't let us videotape. They didn't videotape. They wouldn't let us because privacy concerns about the kids, and they just don't do it. So we didn't record the high school events except for one at Radley College. They have professional recording, and you'll see the recording of that event go up on my channel in the next few days. I think it's probably scheduled for the weekend, for this coming weekend when I'm traveling again. So they will be up. And the debate at Kent University was supposed to be professionally, but you leave it to the students, you leave it to the student groups, and it's always last minute, and it's never done right, and it's never done well. Now, there is a recording up on site right now, and the sound is okay, and the video is There is a better recording supposedly on its way to us that I will upload as soon as we get it. And this is the capitalism versus socialism debate. I think the interesting thing about the capitalism versus socialism debate is it's the first time I've debated a serious and indeed articulate, well-spoken, smart Marxist. I mean, thorough Marxist, not a compromising, middle-of-the-road, slightly left of center, stand for nothing leftist, which is what I usually debate when we debate, capitalism versus democratic socialism, and they usually stand for nothing. This guy, she stood for real socialism. Real socialism. And I think you'll enjoy this debate. I think I was, it was really strong. It was really powerful. I think I made a really strong case on why socialism is evil. I think he gave the best rebuttal you can as a Marxist, and the best rebuttal you can is to deny that there is such a thing as, well, to deny that there's such a thing as a definition of capitalism and to blame all problems in the world on capitalism, which is, what Marx did, but even more dishonest than Marx, because you've had 150, 170 years since Marx wrote to learn about what capitalism really is. And he actually stood for real socialism, actual socialism. When he was cornered and asked what would be the closest he could imagine a country is today to his Marxist socialist ideal, he was honest enough to say Cuba, which I thought was incredibly funny and sad, but honest, because usually anybody who says Denmark is just bizarre. It's nuts. And those who just don't want to name any place, at least he said Cuba. Now, you can critique that. You can rip it to shreds, but now we've got what their model is. Now, he didn't say it was the ideal. He said it was flawed. He had to say that. But he said, they have the best healthcare system in the world. They have great education, all of this stuff, all this nonsense. But it's such a good place to live, is why people swim with the sharks to get out of there. And that's what I said during the debate. So I think it's a really good debate. I think you should watch it. It's on my channel right now. You can find it. It's my debate, Socialism versus Capitalism. It was done at Kent University about a week and 3 days ago. I thought it was very good. I really do. And I think watching it there's a lot of value in watching the debate. I think you'll learn a lot, or you might learn a lot, plus you'll be entertained. A good Q&A as well. Then I also went to St. Petersburg, where I gave a talk at a forum on Ayn Rand that was held in her birthplace, St. Petersburg. About 300 to 500 people were there. I think 600 in and out constantly. At least 300 were there when I gave my speech. It was a lot of libertarians, pro-free marketers, some anarchists, some objectivists, some conservatives. So a mishmash but all young people. Amazing. 300 people to talk about Ayn Rand in St. Petersburg, Russia, when it was freezing and ice outside, and it was just horrible to get there and difficult to get there. And it was pretty amazing. That talk is, I think, going up soon on my channel as well. So my talk in Russia will go up as well. I'm trying to figure out where I can get the best video of it from. We have some video, I'm just not sure how good it is. But that will go up sometime later this week, early next week. Then I went to Sweden, where I had a discussion/debate, really a discussion with Douglas Murray. This is my second of 3 that I've been doing with him. He also just did one at the ARI student conference, I think with either Ankar or Greg or Fleming Rose, or a combination of all of those people. And we had I thought it was a great time. I thought it was really good. He is very intellectual. He's deep. He's a thinker. I don't agree with him on many things. He doesn't agree with me on many things. But I think, again, you would find it quite interesting and quite good. The video of that is up also on my channel, so you can go watch that. The audio is not great there. Again, one of these things where people were just not prepared properly in terms of the audio and setting up the audio, and particularly Murray, who speaks softly and mumbles a little bit and speaks the Queen's English, is sometimes hard to understand, but still very worthwhile to listen and to watch. I don't think we're going to have better audio. It's up on my channel. You can go and watch it. The second debate between me and Douglas Murray, or second discussion between me and Douglas Murray. The first one got a lot of views. One of the most viewed videos I've ever done. This one's lagging, so hopefully some of you will discover it and see that it's really, really good, and it's really, really worth engaging with. And finally, this last weekend, I was at the Ayn Rand Institute conference. I unfortunately only could be there for one day. I had to get back home yesterday, and the conference continued the following day with many other talks, and with Douglas Murray and Fleming Rose participating. I did two things during the one day I was there. I gave a talk on tribalism in American political culture. That is going to go up very soon. Maybe it's already up. I think it's already up. It's already up on my channel, so you can catch that. I thought it was a good talk. I think some of the people from the chat here, it looks like some of you enjoyed that talk a lot. I thought it was really good, and I encourage you to go and find it. It's on the channel already. And then I also did a panel with Ben Baer from the Ayn Rand Institute, a philosopher, and Lars Christensen, from the former CEO and founder of Saxo Bank, who is also a board member of the Ayn Rand Institute. We talked about, basically the relationship between tribalism and the welfare state in Europe and really in the world today, and capitalism, relationship between capitalism and individualism in the world today. So I thought that those events were terrific. I thought all the events were fantastic, and you can find. If you can't find the videos now, you will be able to find those videos on the Ayn Rand Institute website very, very soon. The conference was unbelievable because there were 450 students in Europe. I remember when I went to Europe for the first time as a representative of ARI, maybe 15, 16, 17, maybe even 18 years ago. There was nothing there. It was a desert. There were a few older objectivists who had been around for a long time, some of them who I'd known, but there was just very little. There was a little bit going on in Scandinavia, but there was a little bit going on in the UK, but there was very few activities, very few books in circulation, very few translations. There was just nothing going on. And today, it's just unbelievable. The books are in all the languages, they're in print. The books are in every bookstore in London, in the UK. There are students studying these ideas all over Europe. There's a John Galt school, which people attend. 20 students at a time, where they study objectivism intensely over several months. It was started by a young woman by the name of Maya from the Balkans. And the school is primarily in the Balkans, but now it's also expanding into Poland and into other parts of Eastern and Central Europe. And it's unbelievable how exciting it is to see this progress. And I know a lot of you are very skeptical, particularly those of you who are formerly European and have now moved to the United States. There's a lot of you out there who believes, no, Europe's too far gone, Europe's no good, you should focus only in the US. I disagree completely, particularly when it comes to Eastern Europe. There is an energy, there is an excitement, there is an interest, there's a passion. Eastern Europe and the UK, and Scandinavia, by the way, about Ayn Rand's ideas that just doesn't exist in the US, unfortunately. And I think the investment there, whether those people land up moving to the US, whether those people land up staying in their own countries, I really think the movement that we have today, the objectivist movement, is an international movement. And we should view it as an international movement, not as a US-centric movement. Later in the year, I'll be going to Asia. After that, I'll be going actually next week to Mexico and to Guatemala. I'll be going later in the year, I think, to Southern America, and definitely to Asia on an Asian trip. This is a global movement. We have to find the best and the brightest, the most passionate, interested people in the world and expose them to these ideas. And I'm committed to doing that, and I know the Ayn Rand Institute is committed to doing that. So I thought the program at ARCon was fantastic. There was some excellent Q&As. Ankar Gate was there, Greg Salamieri was there, Ben Baer was there, Lars Christensen, I was there, and Tal Tzfani, who I think, from what I hear, got a standing ovation for his presentation about the future of ARI. And, 450 students, and they varied from people who know objectivism really, really well and studied it to people who've just been introduced to Ayn Rand and have no clue really what it's all about. And, it was a massive success and massively exciting. And I think you can find the live stream is up on YouTube. But I think if you come to one of these, those of you Americans, you will start being cynical about Europe and about the future. So, somebody says, Jimbo says, Tal was amazing. That's great to hear. So come on over and see this for yourselves. I'm sure this is going to be an annual conference. Not sure yet where the next one will be, although of course the Prague location was ideal, right? It's smack in the middle of Europe, relatively easy to get to, good airport, good facilities, great lecture series. Somebody's asking, what about Central Asia? A little hard. The most Central Asia I'll get is Mongolia, where I'll be in June, and on the other side, maybe Tbilisi, which is really part of Europe, not so much Central Asia, but unlikely to get to other parts of Central Asia. It's just too much Islam, too much focus on Islam. So anyway, it was really fantastic, and I'm very excited about Europe and very excited about everything. I don't think we're going to do one in Portugal. Sorry, Vinicius, it's just too far. It's just too far. I think Prague was perfect, easy to get to, right in the middle. I mean, to get from Tbilisi to Lisbon is not easy, but we got some people from Tbilisi to Prague. And I think we can, if we do this right, get even more people from Tbilisi. Tbilisi is a hotbed of interest in objectivism. So, if you stay tuned to this channel, you will hear about my future adventures in places like Mongolia in June. And of course, I'm going to be doing Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Shanghai, Seoul, South Korea, and Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, all in one trip coming up here in May and June. And we'll be going back to Europe in March, April, doing 3 talks in Israel, I hope, and a bunch of talks in London and at universities and some other places. So a lot of more international travel. Saturday, I'll be speaking, this coming Saturday, I'll be speaking in Mexico City at the big Students for Liberty conference there, and then doing 3 more talks in Mexico at universities and to entrepreneurs, and then 1 big talk in Guatemala at Universidad Francisco Marroquin, which is one of the most amazing universities in the world. All right, let's see. Let's stop there in terms of our travel plans. I've already spent a half an hour and haven't got to the topic of today's show, which is the news. Now, I apologize in advance, but I'm still jet lagged, getting over this cold and cough, and I'm not going to be getting into huge in-depth analysis of the news here. I just don't have the energy to do it. So, and I don't know. I thought I'd be low energy today, but it looks like energy so far has been good. But any minute now, I am going to crash completely. So let me just highlight. I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 news-related items that I think are worth doing. I don't know if we'll get to all 6 of them. We'll talk about some of them. These are all kind of news-related items for the last 2 weeks, although most of them are from the last week that I've just picked up. And of course, we haven't had any SuperChat questions today, so you can use the SuperChat feature on YouTube to ask questions, and that'll keep me going. SuperChat has become one of the best ways to support the Yaron Brook Show, and you've really helped a lot revenue-wise by your support on SuperChat. And it's also a great way for you to ask the questions that interest you. So if you have any questions about anything that's happened in the news over the last couple of weeks, use the SuperChat feature on YouTube to ask those questions. I'm looking forward to seeing some of them. All right, let's get started. Well, of course, you have to talk about the national emergency announcement that Donald Trump made. He didn't get his war funding from Congress, which is to be expected. It still bewilders me why this was not tried while the Republicans had the House and the Senate. I know they need 60 votes in the Senate, but you'd think that making a stand while you have a majority in the House makes more sense than making a stand when you don't have a majority in the House and there's no way you're going to get what you want. So just political stuff, just in terms of political acumen, it just shows a pathetic judgment. This should have been done last year. when the Republicans had the majority. But this is what's interesting. Basically, what Trump is doing is he's using an executive order to override the legislature. He's using an executive order to override the legislature. Now, I think this is unconstitutional. I think this is an abuse of power. And I think every time what's his name, Obama did it, the Republicans freaked out. Every time Obama did an executive order, Republicans said it's unconstitutional, this is ridiculous, this is awful, this is abuse of power. And of course, now that a Republican is doing, Republicans are fairly silent, although this is so obviously an abuse of power that some Republicans are making a deal out of it. But we'll see if they do anything to actually block him. I have my doubts. So, the founders created this beautiful system of government. They created a system of government with clear division of labor, clear division of power, and the ability for different bodies to override other bodies. So we have two houses, House of Representatives and the Senate. We have the president, and they are involved in legislation, and they can veto each other. Then we have a president who can't write legislation, can't write laws. This is why executive orders are so unconstitutional, so absurd, and so ridiculous. And I wish the Supreme Court would rule them unconstitutional because they are legislation from the executive branch. And I know that Congress has written legislation that allows the president to do this, like this 1978 bill that allows the president to declare emergency situations. They should repeal those laws, or the Supreme Court should rule those laws unconstitutional and get rid of them. But that is the Congress defaulting on its responsibility to be the legislature because they're cowards. They're too afraid to pass laws. You want a wall? Pass a bill. You want an emergency? Pass a bill. You want to go to war? Pass a bill. But they've given the presidency, not just Trump, but the presidency, massive amounts of power over the last years. I mean, the same with trade. It used to be that Congress had to decide what our trade policy was. But over the decades, they have given more and more and more authority to the president to decide on trade policy unilaterally without Congress's approval. Now that's absurd. That is ridiculous, and we really do need to reverse the trend of turning the presidency into the ability to legislate. It's not. It's happening at the regulatory agency level, where Congress basically passes bills that are empty, content to be filled in by regulators, which is given again the executive branch, the ability, the authority to basically write laws. So that is just horrific, and that's a long-term trend. It's not Trump. It's a long-term trend that needs to be reversed. And again, it just shows you how politics works. When Republicans were in the opposition, they yelled and screamed unconstitutional about what Obama did. Now that it's a Republican doing it, they don't care. They just don't care. Now Democrats are screaming unconstitutional. Anyway, this emergency is part of that trend of the executive branch taking more and more power. But, and I think it's probably been abused. It's been, the emergency thing has been used by presidents 58 times. And my guess is that all of it has been an abuse of power. All of it. All of it should have gone through Congress. And this is no different. This is wrong and bad, and it should have gone through Congress. And just like probably in many of those other declarations, we don't face an emergency. And Trump, as usual for Trump, just lies through his teeth in order to establish, in order to claim that there is an emergency, right? Illegal immigration across the southern border is down almost 90% from its peak in 2000. Doesn't sound like an emergency to me. Drugs that come into the United States, 90%, according to Drug Enforcement Agency, almost all the drugs coming into the United States, I'm not sure the percentage exactly, comes in through regular border passages. It comes in cars that are crossing the border in El Paso and Tijuana and places in San Diego and places like that, not through those sections of the border that don't have walls. Human trafficking. There's almost no evidence to suggest that human trafficking, in a sense of bringing in women that are tied up and across the border, there's just no evidence of this. And yet, Donald Trump used all those three as not just that that's happening, but it's happening at such an extent. It poses such a threat to the lives of Americans that he must declare a national emergency and use the military's funds in order to build a wall that would be ineffective in stopping this, a wall that has to be 2,000 miles long, a wall that will take 20 years to build, a wall that will require massive use of eminent domain, a wall that will be legislated in the courts because of use of eminent domain and because of abuse of private property. It will take forever to build a wall that's irrelevant to anything important today in the United States. We have emergencies. Government spending out of control is an emergency. U.S. debt at $22 trillion is an emergency. The state of the United States healthcare system and the nuttiness of the growth of spending on Medicare and Medicaid is an emergency. Social Security potentially going already negative and potentially going bankrupt within a decade is an emergency. The state of American education, primarily of government education, is suddenly an emergency. I mean, two most important industries in America, education and healthcare, which are now almost entirely run by the government, they are both in a state of emergency. That would be the kind of emergency I'd want to see a president declare. And yet, instead, we're dealing with some illegal immigrations coming in from the southern border that do not pose, for the most part, a physical threat to the well-being and the rights of Americans. And again, the crime statistics of the president, he just lies about them. He makes them up. They have no foundation in reality. And, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates we've ever had. So what jobs emergency is there? And drug war, I'm against the drug war. So there certainly is no emergency. The only emergency with a drug war is let's get rid of the drug war. Let's drive drug enforcement to zero. Let's legalize drugs and get rid of the militarization of our policing agencies in order to deal with gangs that would not exist if not for the drug war. You want to deal with M13 or whatever it's called? Get rid of the drug war. That would be step number one, and then round up all these guys and try them and put them in jail. But a wall's not going to stop any of that. It's just going to intensify it. It's going to raise the profit margin on drugs. It's going to make it more risky if it might do nothing, which is the most likely. But if it's true that some of the drugs come in from the border where there's no wall, now it'll be harder, more expensive, more deaths, more destruction, more fighting, more gangs. So, what a catastrophe. But it's par for the course for Donald Trump. He is just, he lies, he misrepresents and makes stuff up like no other president in history, and does it on a scale and in a regularity and in a normalcy and without any embarrassment or shame that no other president has ever done before. All right, so yeah, I mean, it's an absurd declaration of an emergency. I'm curious to see how the courts will deal with it. The attempted defenses of this are pathetic that I've seen online. There's just absolutely zero excuse for this. Even if you think that illegal immigration is a problem in the United States, the solution is not a wall over 2,000 miles. Over 50% of all the illegal immigrants that come in with visas and then overstay their visa. This does nothing to solve that problem. What problem does exactly solve? Nothing other than it's demagogy. It is pure, unadulterated demagogy. The wall, build the wall, build the wall, build the wall. The chants at his rallies tell you all you need to know about the power of this issue, and it's a symbolic issue. It has no actual, positive impacts on the world than many, many negatives. All right, I'll take one Super Chat question from Brandon. Thoughts about Howard Schultz? I mean, in a normal election year, I would say Howard Schultz is terrible. He's awful. He's a lefty. He's one of these businessmen who feels morally obligated to endorse any leftist cause, primarily the environmentalist cause. He's a huge environmentalist, and he's I think somewhat feels guilty. Whoops, what happened to? Okay, somewhat. I'm sure he's for higher taxes on the rich. On a number of different scales, he is, an embarrassment to billionaires. I mean, he is a billionaire, but it's sad. On the other hand, he is a real entrepreneur and businessman. He really created real values. He changed the world in substantial ways. It's hard to go to travel around the world without seeing Starbucks everywhere. Schultz is the former CEO and the founder of Starbucks. He has truly done something. I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for him as a businessman. He's one of the great retail businessmen of the last 30 years. He's really changed the world. It's not just Starbucks. He's created a whole industry that is the coffee industry, the coffee shop, if you will, industry. And changed the way we consume coffee, changed the way we drink coffee, changed the way I love it. And I love Starbucks, and I love everything about Starbucks. Stuart says on YouTube that he criticized Medicare for All, so great. So at least he's not for socialized medicine. I think the one good thing about him is he's a realist when it comes to government spending. I think I think he's somebody that might actually make an effort in entitlement reform, because I think he realizes that you can't just spend and spend and spend and spend without any consequences. So I think he would actually try to reform entitlements. I think he would actually engage in probably some of the best economic policies of any of the candidates running. I think he'd be far better for the economy than Donald Trump. I think he's a much more savvy businessman than Donald Trump. I think he's a much more accomplished human being than Donald Trump, and I think he's much smarter and just knows more. He tends to be on the left on several issues, particularly the environment, which worries me. But look, if the option was today between Howard Schultz, Donald Trump, and pretty much anybody in the Democratic Party, not knowing anything more than those are the three candidates, I would vote for Howard Schultz. Now, I have to say, I wouldn't vote for anybody because I can't vote in American elections because I live in Puerto Rico and I'm a resident of Puerto Rico, and as such, I am barred for voting for president, which is actually a bit of a relief. I don't actually have to choose between all these losers. But I think Howard Schultz is serious, and he's an interesting guy. And he's not a free marketeer, and he's nowhere near to being the kind of presidential candidate I would like to see. But given the options, he might be the best option out there. I also think that he doesn't have a chance in hell. He's not charismatic. He does not have name recognition. He would have to run as CEO of Starbucks. He would have to link his name, and I think he'd feel uncomfortable doing that. I just don't see how he can go anywhere, given his lack of charisma and lack of name recognition in the kind of world we have today. He would have to pull some Ross Perot stunts and have to figure out how to do those stunts. And he could be, the only option he would have is that at the end of the day, he would seem like the adult in the room, right? You would have all these kindergarten kids, Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren, yapping away. And the Schultz would be the adult in the room, and voters would go for her. Somebody says Haley 2020. Yeah, I wish Haley would run against Trump. I would definitely encourage people to vote for Nikki Haley over Donald Trump any day. I would encourage anybody to vote for pretty much anybody over Donald Trump in a Republican primary in 2020. So, but Nikki Haley, I'm impressed with Nikki Haley, and I would encourage people to vote for her if And I'm sure I'm going to disagree with a lot of what she comes out with, because she'll have to cater to the religious right, like all Republicans do. And maybe she is part of the religious right, I don't know. But she strikes me as impressive. Anyway, Schultz is about as good as it gets in the world we live in today. Okay, here's another one. Should we worry about artificial intelligence becoming too intelligent? What if they can program themselves? I mean, yeah, they will be able to, in a sense, program themselves, but I wouldn't worry about it. I don't know what there is to worry about. They are not conscious. They do not have free will. They do not have values. You, as the programmer, are still in control, even of their own self-programming. You can limit what they can program and how they can program and what they can program for. It's still true that human beings set the goal. Human beings set the values. Computers cannot value because they're not alive. They're not alive, and I don't think computers will ever be alive. I think life is a biological function, not an electronic function. We still cannot recreate life. We still don't have the science to recreate life. I think one day we might be able to create biological intelligence, which would then mimic human beings, and maybe then we'll have to have the rights like human beings. But as long as computers are just 0 ones, electrons flying around in very, very sophisticated networks, they are not human beings. They're not thinking. They're not conscious. They're not, and I don't fear them. I actually see the incredible benefits of having them. They are an add-on to human intelligence that makes our intelligence much more efficacious in the world, much more capable of making changes and doing things exciting about human life in the world. So I think artificial intelligence, I'm not sure you should even call it artificial intelligence, because it's not really intelligence. I think the whole field is amazing and exciting, and I think that I think it's going to benefit mankind tremendously. So I'm actually excited about it, not fearing of it. Okay. White Fox asks, Yaron, assuming you have one, what is your opinion on video games past and present? I don't have an opinion because I've never played them. I think the last video game I played was like in the 1980s, maybe, ping pong or whatever online, pong, 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 pong. But let me say something about the little I know. Knowing something little about something has never stopped me in the past, I guess. I think video games are fascinating. Video games are probably a new type of aesthetic experience. They can, I think, maybe rise to the level of being art. You're creating a world. You're creating a world based on, I think, an artist's metaphysical value judgments, which is what Rand. It's a world in which you engage, but you contemplate. You're involved. It's like a story where you're inside the story. So it's a new art form where you are interacting with the story and with what is happening. I think it has unbelievable potential. I hope that some good storytellers get into the game industry and do more to enhance it and activate it. Maybe we could have some objectivist themes to some of these games. But I think they're probably fascinating and good. I know that people think that they're destroying the youth. I doubt that. Although I do think that probably young people spend too much time on games. There's probably some significant benefits as well as some risks involved in that fact. So I'm very positive about games, particularly about their potential and what they can and will become, and particularly about the potential for great storytelling and for new aesthetic experiences. So yeah, all the power to games. Upton says video games as art is a hugely controversial topic. I think in the gaming industry, and I think it should be a hugely controversial topic because it's kind of a mixed. It's not a pure art in the sense that it's not just there for contemplation because you're engaged with it. But that's, I think it's a new frontier. It's something new. It's something exciting. It's something interesting. And I think a conversation that objectivists should participate in terms of what would make a game art and what would make a game non-art. I don't think all games are art, but I think games can rise to that level. So yeah, I mean, I'd be curious what people who actually play these games think, and I'd be curious what they say. As a follow-up, White Fox asks, what's your take on BioShock specifically, the franchise's impact on contemporary culture and people's understanding egoism and rant? I mean, I think it's very mixed. So I don't have first-hand experience with BioShock. As I said, I never played video games and I never played it. My understanding is that it's a particularly good game, quad game, and that it was very critical of objectivism in that it set up a straw man objectivism and then ripped it to shreds. That is, it took a misunderstood idea about objectivism and then ripped it to shreds in the game, and you have to save the world from the consequences of the influence of objectivism. That's my understanding of BioShock. And again, I'm curious what people who actually played BioShock think about this. I also think that probably it turned off some people off of objectivism because it strawmanned objectivism, presented a false view of what objectivism is. And if people believed that view, they turned away and they weren't curious to follow through and to follow up and to actually engage with it. On the other hand, I have met a lot of people over the years who got into objectivism because they played BioShock and they were curious about what this stuff was, and then went and read Ayn Rand. And then they figured out for themselves that BioShock was wrong in how it presented the issue. So, I think that on net, it probably had a very positive influence. On net, it probably turned more people who wouldn't have read Ayn Rand into Ayn Rand readers than it turned people off of Ayn Rand that would have read Ayn Rand if not for the game. So I actually think that is that the overall impact of BioShock was positive. Chris is asking recommended books on philosophy of science. I really don't have any, certainly not off the cuff. I'd have to think about it and put a list together. I do recommend David Harriman's book on the philosophy of science, is the name of which escapes me. Maybe somebody on the chat can remind me of the name of David Harriman's book on induction. But that would be one book that I would recommend on the philosophy of science, and but I'm sure there are others if I had a little bit of time to think about it. So those are the kind of questions that are best given to me in advance. I'm writing that down, and I'll try to do it in a future show, or even better, bring on a philosophy of science person who can recommend the books directly to you. Bash Brannigan says a computer will never be U.S. president. I think that's right. Good to see you back home, Yaron. I'm glad to be back home. I need to get some rest. And actually on the fact that I need to get some rest, I'm going to go get some rest. So we're going to cut it off here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more topics I wanted to cover, and I will cover tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So we'll do quite a few shows in the coming week, probably back to our usual time of 7 or 8 o'clock East Coast time. We'll see how that pans out tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll do a show. We'll probably do a show. I'll try to do a show every day of the week, but it depends on other things happening in my schedule. Dave Harriman's book is The Logical Leap. Thank you, Upton. Logical Leap by David Harriman is a book I recommend in terms of philosophy of science. I also recommend the work of Keith Lockitch. And Keith just put out he gave a good talk and a good article about something I know nothing about, but it looked really, really interesting. And you can find that on the New Ideal, the the publication of the journal, the online journal of the Ayn Rand Institute. So the New Ideal, Keith Lockitch's work, I also highly recommend. Finally, there is a new Ayn Rand Institute University app. Ayn Rand Institute University app. You can get it on the Google Store and you can get it on Apple Store to download onto your phone. It is unbelievable because it has dozens of Ayn Rand lectures, dozens of Leonard Peikoff lectures, all of Leonard's, or most of Leonard Peikoff's courses. And you can download the stuff on the app to listen even when you don't have an internet connection, or you can just listen to them right from the app. It is absolutely fantastic. So We're calling this just like Prager University. We're calling this Ayn Rand University. And the app is ready. It looks gorgeous. It works great. Please go today, now, and download the app. Again, the app is Ayn Rand. Just look on the Apple Store, in the App Store, Ayn Rand University, both in Google for Android phones, on the Android Store and on the Apple Store. It should be in both of those, and that is very, very exciting. Okay. Let's see. Let me end by just reminding you can support the show on subscribestar.com, but the best way to support the show, the best way to support the Yaron Brook Show is to go to yaronbrookshow.com, press the support button, and do it directly on the site, and you will get all the benefits you used to get on Patreon. So those of you who used to be Patreon subscribers, please do it now on my website. Those of you who are Patreon subscribers, please move your subscriptions to my website. And those of you who are not subscribers, where you're going to get content like this, please subscribe and make this show possible. Show your support. You can do that on the yaronbrookshow.com. And if you want a third-party servicer, subscribestar.com. All right, people, I will talk to you all tomorrow, where we'll cover many of the topics I did not cover today, and most importantly, Saturday Night Live and Donald Trump. Bye, everybody.